Section 1. A Britain of Magic and Fear. The World Before Hogwarts. Long before Hogwarts became a name spoken with familiarity, comfort, and a sense of belonging, the magical world of Britain existed in a far more fragile and uncertain state. To understand why Hogwarts was founded and why it took the specific form it did, we first need to settle into the atmosphere of the centuries that came before it. This was not a time of orderly education, standardized spell work, or clearly defined wizarding lore. It was a world shaped by isolation, local custom, fear, and survival. In the early medieval period, magical people in Britain did not experience magic as a shared culture. Instead, magic was intensely local. Families passed knowledge down through generations, in private, often orally, with little consistency from one region to another. A charm used in one valley might be entirely unknown 2 villages away. Magical techniques were shaped by environment, temperament, and tradition rather than by any centralized authority. This made magic deeply personal, but also dangerously uneven. For many witches and wizards, learning magic was not a structured process at all. Children discovered their abilities through uncontrolled outbursts, accidents, or moments of emotional stress. Some families nurtured these moments carefully, while others feared them. In households where magic was misunderstood or distrusted, children were sometimes discouraged from using their abilities at all, taught instead to hide or suppress them. This inconsistency meant that talent often went undeveloped, misdirected, or even dangerous. Beyond the home, the wider social climate was increasingly hostile. Medieval Britain was steeped in superstition. Illness, crop failure, strange weather, and unexplained deaths were frequently attributed to supernatural causes. While magic existed, it was poorly understood by non-magical people and often conflated with darker forces. Witches and wizards became convenient explanations for fear, and fear has a way of turning quickly into violence. Historical records from the wizarding world indicate that persecution was not constant everywhere, but it was persistent enough to shape behavior. Magical families learned to live quietly, to blend in when possible, and to move when necessary. Some communities became nomadic, never settling in one place for long. Others isolated themselves in remote regions where magical concealment was easier. Trust between magical and non-magical neighbours eroded steadily. This climate made shared learning nearly impossible. Bringing magical children together in groups risked exposure. Teaching advanced magic carried consequences if spells were seen or overheard. Even communication between distant magical families was unreliable, as travel was slow and often dangerous. Flue powder, apparition, and portkeys were either undeveloped or not widely known at this stage, limiting contact between communities. As a result, magical knowledge fractured. Some families specialized narrowly, becoming experts in healing, charms, or herb lore, while remaining ignorant of other disciplines entirely. Others experimented recklessly, lacking guidance or ethical grounding. There was no shared agreement on what magic should be used for, how it should be taught, or who should be trusted with it. This fragmentation also affected how young witches and wizards saw themselves. Without a broader community, many grew up believing they were alone. A child who showed magical ability might never meet another like them outside their immediate family. This isolation shaped identity in subtle but profound ways, fostering fear, secrecy, and sometimes shame. It is within this context that the idea of a magical school begins to take shape. The concept itself was radical. To gather magical children together in one place, to teach them openly, and to do so consistently over time required not only courage, but extraordinary magical skill. It demanded a location that could be hidden, protected, and sustained across generations. It required a shared philosophy of education and an agreement about what kind of magical society was worth building. The need was not abstract. Accidents involving untrained magic were common. Young witches and wizards injured themselves and others through uncontrolled spellcasting. Magical creatures were mishandled. Potions went wrong with lethal consequences. Without guidance, raw talent became a liability. At the same time, the magical community faced an existential question. Could it continue to survive in secrecy while remaining so disorganized? Or was it time to create institutions that could preserve knowledge, culture, and safety in a more deliberate way? This tension between secrecy and survival sits at the heart of Hogwarts' founding. The school was not merely an educational experiment, it was a response to crisis. It represented a belief that magic could be taught responsibly, that community could be built without inviting destruction, and that the future of wizardkind depended on cooperation rather than isolation. The world before Hogwarts was not without magic, wonder, or brilliance, but it was unstable. Knowledge vanished with individuals. Talent was wasted. Fear dictated behaviour. Hogwarts would be designed as an answer to all of these problems, but that answer would require visionaries capable of seeing beyond their own time. Those visionaries would come from different backgrounds, hold different values, and ultimately disagree in ways that would shape the school forever. But before they became founders, they were products of this same fractured world. Understanding the conditions they emerged from helps explain both their brilliance and their flaws. As we move forward, keep this image in mind: a magical Britain without structure, without safety, and without shared purpose. Hogwarts did not rise from comfort or abundance. It rose from necessity, fear, and a stubborn hope that something better could be built. Section 2. The four founders, origins, values, and early reputations. By the time the idea of a unified magical school began to form, 4 witches and wizards had already distinguished themselves within the fragmented magical communities of Britain. They were not leaders in any formal sense because no such centralised leadership existed, but their names were known, their abilities were respected. Their philosophies, though different, carried weight. These 4 individuals would come to be remembered as the founders of Hogwarts: Godric Gryffindor, Helga Hufflepuff, Rowena Ravenclaw, and Salazar Slytherin. Each founder emerged from a different regional, cultural, and philosophical background. This diversity was not accidental. It was precisely because they saw magic, education, and society differently that Hogwarts was able to become something more durable than any one vision alone. At the same time, those differences planted the seeds of future conflict. Godric Gryffindor is traditionally associated with the wild, open landscapes of what is now the West Country of England. Historical accounts within the wizarding world describe him as a duelist of extraordinary skill, but to reduce him to combat alone would miss the deeper point of his reputation. Gryffindor believed deeply in courage as a moral quality rather than a physical one. To him, bravery was not simply facing danger, but choosing to act when inaction would be easier. This belief shaped how he approached magical education. Gryffindor valued students who were willing to try, even when failure was likely. He believed mistakes were an inevitable part of learning magic, and that fear of error was more dangerous than error itself. In a time when uncontrolled magic could have serious consequences, this philosophy was both bold and controversial. Helga Hufflepuff came from a very different tradition, associated with the broad valleys and farming communities of medieval Britain. Hufflepuff was known not for dramatic displays of magic, but for consistency, patience, and an inclusive approach to teaching. She believed that magical ability existed across a wide spectrum, and that dedication and kindness mattered as much as innate talent. Hufflepuff's reputation rested largely on her skill as a practical witch. She excelled in charms related to household magic, food preparation, and healing. These were not glamorous disciplines, but they were essential to daily life. Her philosophy held that magic should support community, not elevate individuals above it. This perspective made her particularly sensitive to the uneven access to magical education that existed at the time. Where others saw limitation, Hufflepuff saw opportunity. She believed that with the right guidance, almost any magical child could become competent, responsible, and fulfilled. Rowena Ravenclaw was perhaps the most overtly intellectual of the founders. She came from the Scottish Highlands, a region already associated with ancient magic and learning. Ravenclaw was renowned for her sharp mind, innovative spell work, and love of knowledge for its own sake. She believed that understanding magic deeply was the key to wielding it safely. Ravenclaw valued curiosity, logic, and creativity. She questioned assumptions and encouraged debate. In an era where magical practices were often inherited unquestioningly, this approach was quietly revolutionary. Ravenclaw pushed for a curriculum that included theory alongside practice, believing that knowing why a spell worked was just as important as knowing how to cast it. Her contributions to the founding of Hogwarts would extend beyond philosophy. Many architectural and magical design elements of the castle are attributed to her influence, including puzzles, enchanted mechanisms, and protective enchantments that rewarded cleverness rather than brute force. Salazar Slytherin remains the most controversial of the four founders. He hailed from the Fenlands of eastern Britain, a region long associated with secrecy and ancient bloodlines. Slytherin was an exceptionally powerful wizard, particularly skilled in the rare and dangerous art of Parseltongue, the ability to speak with snakes. Slytherin believed strongly in the preservation of magical bloodlines. In his view, magic was safest in the hands of those born into magical families who had been raised to understand its responsibilities. This belief did not initially place him outside the consensus. At the time, many witches and wizards shared concerns about teaching magic to those with no magical heritage, fearing exposure, misuse, or cultural dilution. However, Slytherin's views were more rigid than those of the others. Where Gryffindor emphasized moral courage, Hufflepuff emphasized inclusion, and Ravenclaw emphasized knowledge. Slytherin emphasized control. He believed that magic, if spread too widely, would invite catastrophe. Despite these differences, the four founders were united by a shared recognition of the problem they faced. They agreed that magical children deserved safety, guidance, and community. They agreed that secrecy, while necessary, should not come at the cost of ignorance or isolation. they agreed that a school could serve as both sanctuary and beacon. Their early collaboration was likely cautious rather than harmonious. Trust had to be built slowly. Each founder would have needed assurance that the others would not compromise their core values. The decision to work together was itself an act of faith. It is important to remember that these were not abstract thinkers removed from reality. Each founder had lived through the dangers of unstructured magical life. They had seen what happened when magic was mishandled, hidden too deeply, or wielded without ethical grounding. Hogwarts was, in many ways, an attempt to prevent those mistakes from repeating. As plans for the school took shape, each founder began to imagine the kind of students they hoped to nurture. These visions would eventually crystallize into the house system, but at this stage, they were personal ideals rather than institutional structures. Gryffindor imagined students who would stand up for what was right, even when doing so carried personal risk. Hufflepuff imagined students who would support one another, work diligently, and value fairness. Ravenclaw imagined students who would question, explore, and expand the boundaries of magical understanding. Slytherin imagined students who would be ambitious, resourceful, and fiercely protective of the magical world. None of these ideals were inherently incompatible. The tragedy of the founders' story lies not in their differences, but in how those differences would later be strained by fear and mistrust. At the moment of Hogwarts' founding, however, those tensions remained unresolved but contained. The four founders stood at the edge of something unprecedented, bound together by a shared hope that education could change the fate of their world. Section 3. Choosing the site. Why the Scottish Highlands and why that lake? Once the idea of a unified magical school had taken hold, the founders faced a question that would shape everything that followed. Where could such a place exist? A school like Hogwarts could not simply be built anywhere. It needed to be hidden, protected, defensible, and sustainable across centuries. The decision of location was not merely practical, it was philosophical. The Scottish Highlands offered something that few other regions of Britain could provide, based on what we know from later historical accounts and magical geography. Vast stretches of land were sparsely populated, shaped by rugged terrain, deep valleys, and unpredictable weather. For non-magical people, these landscapes were difficult to traverse and even harder to settle. For witches and wizards, however, the land itself resonated with ancient magic. Magic, as understood by the founders, was not evenly distributed across the world. Certain places accumulated magical energy over time, shaped by natural features, historical use, and long-standing enchantments. The Highlands were one such place. Stone circles, ley lines, and old magical sites dotted the region, many long abandoned or forgotten by non-magical society. Building Hogwarts here allowed the founders to anchor the school within a landscape already attuned to magic. Remoteness was another critical factor. A magical school required secrecy above all else. While the International Statute of Secrecy would not be formally established for centuries, the need to hide magical activity was already deeply understood. The Highlands' isolation reduced the risk of accidental discovery. Travellers were rare, settlements were small, strange occurrences could be dismissed as local superstition. But remoteness alone was not enough. The founders sought a location that could be defended not just through concealment, but through layered protection. The chosen site offered natural barriers in every direction. Mountains limited approach from the land. Dense forests created confusion and disorientation. The climate itself discouraged prolonged exploration. At the heart of this landscape lay a vast freshwater lake. The decision to build the castle beside it was deliberate. Water, in magical theory, is both a boundary and a conduit. It separates spaces, reflects enchantments, and anchors protective spells. A large body of water provided a natural moat on a scale no ordinary fortress could match. The lake also allowed for magical complexity. Beneath its surface, spells could be anchored invisibly. Magical creatures could be housed discreetly. Approaches by air, land, or water could all be monitored and defended. The founders understood that a school meant to last generations would need defences capable of evolving. The site itself was likely revealed through a combination of exploration, divination, and intuition. Wizarding legends recorded centuries later suggest that Rowena Ravenclaw experienced a vivid dream in which a wild hog led her to the location of the castle. While this account is widely repeated, it cannot be definitively verified and should be understood as legend rather than documented fact. What is certain is that Ravenclaw's insight played a major role in identifying a place where magic felt stable, deep, and enduring. Once the site was chosen, the founders faced the challenge of shaping it. Building a castle of Hogwarts scale required more than stone and labour. It required enchantments capable of binding the structure to the land itself. The castle would need to resist decay, intrusion, and discovery. Early enchantments appear to have focused on concealment based on how Hogwarts protections function in later centuries. Hogwarts was designed to appear differently depending on who approached it. To non-magical eyes, it would present itself as a ruin, unsafe and unremarkable. This illusion was not static. It adapted, responding to perception and intent. The founders also layered the site with protective magic that blurred boundaries. Paths shifted, distances stretched or contracted. What seemed close might take hours to reach. What seemed obvious might vanish entirely. These spatial distortions served both to protect the castle and to reinforce the idea that Hogwarts existed slightly apart from the ordinary world. The lake itself became an extension of the castle's defences. Magical theory suggests that water amplifies enchantments tied to reflection and concealment. Spells cast into the lake could ripple outward, reinforcing protections along the shoreline and into the surrounding land. Over time, the lake became home to magical creatures that further discouraged intrusion. Choosing the Highlands also carried symbolic weight. By situating the school far from centres of political power, the founders signalled that Hogwarts was meant to serve education, not governance. It would not belong to kings or councils. Its authority would rest on knowledge, tradition, and trust. This separation allowed Hogwarts to remain relatively independent as wizarding society evolved. It could adapt to new laws, new customs, and new challenges without being fully subsumed by them. The castle's physical isolation mirrored its philosophical independence. As construction plans took shape, the founders began to see the location not just as a hiding place, but as a partner. The land would shape the school's rhythms, seasons would matter, weather would influence daily life. Students would learn to live with magic as part of the natural world, rather than as something imposed upon it. The Highlands demanded respect. This was not a gentle environment. but it rewarded preparation, cooperation, and resilience. These qualities would become central to Hogwarts' identity. In choosing this site, the founders were not simply hiding from the world. They were creating a space where magic could be studied openly, without fear, anchored in a landscape that had always whispered of the extraordinary. The castle would rise from stone and spell, but its foundations were laid in geography, intention, and trust in the land itself. Section 4. Building Hogwarts, Stone Enchantments and the Problem of Permanence. With the site chosen and its magical potential confirmed, the founders faced the immense challenge of construction. Building Hogwarts was never going to be a conventional architectural project. No existing structure could serve as a template for what they envisioned. The castle needed to function simultaneously as a school, a sanctuary, a fortress, and a living magical system capable of enduring for centuries. The earliest phase of construction focused on anchoring the castle to the land itself. Stone was chosen not only for durability, but for its ability to hold enchantments over long periods of time. Certain types of stone were believed to resonate more strongly with magical energy, particularly when quarried from nearby regions already saturated with ancient magic. Transporting stone long distances was avoided whenever possible, reinforcing the bond between the castle and its surroundings. Magic played a role in construction from the very beginning, but it was used carefully. The founders understood that magic alone could not create permanence. Enchantments could fail, weaken, or be undone. Physical craftsmanship provided a stable foundation that magic could then reinforce. Walls were raised by hand as much as by spell, blending human labour with magical assistance. One of the greatest challenges was scale. Hogwarts was never intended to be a modest structure. From the outset, it was designed to accommodate large numbers of students, faculty, and staff, as well as future expansion. This required not only physical space, but magical foresight. Corridors, staircases, and towers were designed with flexibility in mind, allowing the castle to grow and change without compromising its integrity. This adaptability is one of Hogwarts' most distinctive traits. Staircases that shift, rooms that appear or disappear, and corridors that subtly reconfigure themselves are often treated as curiosities by students. In reality, they reflect a deeper architectural philosophy. The founders anticipated change. Rather than resisting it, they built a structure capable of responding to it. Defensive enchantments were layered gradually. Early protections focused on concealment and deterrence rather than outright force. The castle was designed to discourage approach through confusion rather than confrontation. Over time, additional enchantments were added to repel intruders, dampen hostile magic, and alert inhabitants to threats. These protections were not static. They were designed to be renewed, reinforced, and modified by future generations. In this way, Hogwarts became a collaborative project extending beyond its founders' lifetimes. Each headmaster, professor, and caretaker contributed to the castle's evolving magical infrastructure. The interior of the castle received as much attention as its exterior. Classrooms were designed to support specific types of magic, with materials and layouts chosen to minimize risk. Potions dungeons were placed underground to contain fumes and spills. Astronomy towers were positioned for clear views of the night sky. Greenhouses were situated to receive optimal sunlight. Living spaces were designed with comfort in mind. The founders believed that students needed stability and warmth in order to learn effectively. Fireplaces, common areas, and shared dormitories fostered a sense of belonging. This emphasis on comfort was not indulgent, it was practical. A student who felt safe and supported was less likely to misuse magic. One of the most remarkable aspects of Hogwarts' construction was the integration of enchantments that allowed the castle to assist in its own maintenance. Self-repairing stone, adaptive heating charms, and magical cleaning systems reduced the need for constant manual upkeep. These features ensured that the castle could survive periods of neglect or crisis. The founders were also deeply concerned with longevity. They understood that they would not live forever, and that Hogwarts would eventually be run by people who did not know them personally. This raised questions of governance and continuity. How could they ensure that the castle remained true to its purpose without rigidly enforcing their own beliefs? The answer lay in systems rather than rules. By embedding values into the structure itself, through houses, sorting mechanisms, and shared spaces, the founders created an environment that encouraged certain behaviours without mandating them. The castle became a silent teacher, shaping experience through design. Magic was also used to preserve memory. Portraits, enchanted objects, and recorded spells allowed fragments of the founders' knowledge to persist. These were not perfect substitutes for living guidance, but they provided continuity and institutional memory. As construction progressed, Hogwarts began to take on a presence that went beyond stone and spell. Students and staff would later describe the castle as having moods, preferences, and even a kind of awareness. While this perception is subjective, it reflects the success of the founders' approach. They did not merely build a building, they cultivated a place. The problem of permanence remained central throughout this process. Magic changes, society changes. What is considered safe or ethical in one era may be questioned in another. The founders could not predict every challenge Hogwarts would face, but by prioritizing adaptability, community, and layered protection, they gave the school the best chance to endure. By the time the main structure of Hogwarts was complete, it stood as a testament to collaboration across difference, stone bound by magic, ideals embedded in architecture. A school designed not just to teach spells, but to shape lives. Section 5. Founding the Houses. Educational theory turned into identity. As Hogwarts shifted from an ambitious construction project into a functioning school, the founders confronted one of the most complex questions of magical education. How should students be taught together when their abilities, temperaments, and values differed so widely? The answer they developed would become one of Hogwarts' most defining features: the house system. At its core, the creation of houses was not about competition or division, it was an educational framework. The founders recognized that young witches and wizards learned best when they felt understood, supported, and challenged in ways that aligned with their nature. In a time without standardized pedagogy, houses offered a way to personalize education at scale. Each founder approached this problem through their own philosophy. Godric Gryffindor believed that courage could be cultivated through example and expectation. He understood that bravery often emerged when individuals were surrounded by peers who valued action and integrity. A house aligned with these values could encourage students to take moral risks, speak up, and face uncertainty. Helga Hufflepuff viewed education through a communal lens. She believed that steady effort, cooperation, and fairness created the strongest foundation for learning. A house built on inclusion and diligence would allow students of varying abilities to thrive together, reducing fear of failure and encouraging mutual support. Rowena Ravenclaw approached the question analytically. She recognized that intellectual curiosity flourished in environments that rewarded questioning and creativity. A house devoted to learning for its own sake could nurture scholars, inventors, and theorists who pushed magical understanding forward. Salazar Slytherin emphasized ambition and resourcefulness. He believed that leadership and adaptability were essential for the survival of the magical world. A house that valued strategy, foresight, and determination could produce individuals capable of navigating complex social and political landscapes. Initially, these perspectives coexisted without rigid boundaries. Early discussions likely focused on mentorship rather than segregation. Students might have gravitated toward a particular founder's teachings based on interest or aptitude. Over time, however, the founders recognized the need for clearer structure to ensure continuity beyond their own involvement. The formal establishment of houses provided that structure. By organizing students into distinct communities, the founders created smaller learning environments within the larger school. This allowed for targeted guidance while maintaining a shared Hogwarts identity. Symbols and traditions played an important role from the beginning. Each house adopted emblems, colours, and common spaces that reinforced its values. These elements were not arbitrary. They served as daily reminders of what the house stood for and what was expected of its members. The houses also introduced a sense of belonging that extended beyond academic instruction. Students lived, studied, and socialised primarily within their houses, forming bonds that often lasted a lifetime. This social stability was especially important for young witches and wizards who had grown up isolated or misunderstood. Critically, the founders did not intend houses to be hierarchical. No house was meant to be superior to another. Each fulfilled a role within the broader ecosystem of Hogwarts. The school functioned best when all four houses contributed their strengths. However, the potential for rivalry was always present. Friendly competition could motivate students, but it also carried the risk of division. The founders attempted to mitigate this through shared classes, communal meals, and school-wide traditions that emphasized unity. The house system also addressed practical concerns. It simplified governance, discipline, and pastoral care. Heads of house could monitor student well-being more closely, intervene when problems arose, and tailor guidance to individual needs. Over time, the houses became central to Hogwarts culture. Stories of famous alumni reinforced house identities. Traditions accumulated. Values were passed down not only through instruction, but through shared memory. It is worth noting that the house system, like all institutional structures, reflected the biases and limitations of its creators. While it provided many benefits, it also risked oversimplifying complex individuals. A student sorted into a house at a young age might feel constrained by expectations. The founders seem to have been aware of this tension, as reflected in how the system was described and defended in later writings. The system was designed to guide, not define. Students were encouraged to grow, change, and learn from one another across house lines. The presence of shared classes and collaborative projects reflected this intention. Despite its imperfections, the house system proved remarkably resilient. It adapted to changing educational needs, societal shifts, and internal conflicts. Its endurance speaks to the founders' insight into human nature and learning. By embedding educational philosophy into social structure, the founders transformed abstract values into lived experience. Hogwarts students did not merely study courage, loyalty, wisdom, or ambition. They practiced these qualities daily within their house communities. As the school matured, the house system became inseparable from Hogwarts' identity. It shaped how students understood themselves, their peers, and their place within the magical world. Section 6. The Sorting Hat, a governance solution disguised as a ritual. With the house system defined in principle, the founders were confronted by a practical and deeply philosophical challenge. How would students be assigned to houses after the founders themselves were gone? As long as the four remained actively involved at Hogwarts, they could personally observe students, speak with them, and guide them toward the communities that suited them best. But Hogwarts was never meant to depend on the constant presence of its creators. The founders understood that institutions often fail not at the moment of their creation, but in the generations that follow. Systems that rely too heavily on individual judgment tend to fracture when that judgment is no longer available. Hogwarts needed a method of sorting that could endure beyond memory, bias, and personal preference. The solution they devised was elegant, symbolic, and quietly radical: the sorting hat. At its simplest level, the sorting hat is a magical artifact that assigns students to one of the four houses based on their traits and potential. But this description barely scratches the surface of its true purpose. The sorting hat represents a deliberate attempt to encode governance, ethics, and adaptability into a single object. The hat itself originally belonged to Godric Gryffindor. Before it became enchanted, it was an ordinary, well-worn wizard's hat. Its transformation into a sorting mechanism required the combined magical expertise of all four founders. Each contributed something essential, embedding their values into the enchantment. Gryffindor provided the moral framework. The hat would not simply measure talent or ability, but courage of character. Helga Hufflepuff ensured fairness and inclusivity, preventing the hat from favouring only the most obvious or dramatic traits. Rowena Ravenclaw contributed the intellectual complexity that allowed the hat to analyse nuance rather than rely on rigid categories. Salazar Slytherin embedded ambition, foresight, and an awareness of lineage and potential. The result was an artifact capable of weighing multiple dimensions of a young witch or wizard's personality. The sorting hat does not look only at who a student is at the moment of sorting. It also considers who they might become. This forward-looking aspect is crucial. The founders understood that children are unfinished beings, shaped by environment as much as by nature. This is why the sorting hat is able to listen. When students speak their thoughts, hopes, or fears, the hat incorporates that self-knowledge into its decision. This feature is often misunderstood as leniency or error. In truth, it reflects the founder's belief that choice matters. The sorting hat's ability to deliberate rather than instantly assign speaks to its complexity. It weighs competing values, resolves internal contradictions, and seeks the environment in which a student is most likely to grow responsibly. This process mirrors the founders' original debates about education itself. Importantly, the sorting hat also serves as a safeguard against stagnation. Because it is enchanted to adapt, it can respond to changes in wizarding culture and individual psychology over time. It is not locked into a single era's understanding of virtue or success. The ritual of sorting transforms a governance mechanism into a moment of shared tradition. By framing the process as a ceremony, the founders reduced fear and reinforced unity. Every student, regardless of background, passes through the same experience. This shared beginning helps bind the school together. The public nature of the sorting also serves a subtle social function. By announcing house placements aloud, the ritual establishes identity within community rather than in isolation. Students are welcomed into their houses immediately, reducing anxiety and fostering belonging. At the same time, the sorting hat maintains an aura of mystery. Its songs, often dismissed as eccentric, actually serve an educational role. They recount Hogwarts' history, reinforce values, and remind students of the school's founding purpose. Through these songs, the hat acts as a living archive. Critics have occasionally questioned the wisdom of sorting students at such a young age. The founders were aware of this concern. The hat's enchantments were designed to prioritize flexibility over rigidity. A student sorted into one house is not forbidden from embodying the values of others. The houses are guides, not cages. The sorting hat also reflects compromise. While the founders disagreed on who should be taught, they agreed that the sorting process itself should remain neutral and principled. Even Salazar Slytherin accepted the hat as a long-term solution, trusting that it would uphold what he valued. This trust in hindsight was both necessary and fraught. The sorting hat would outlast the founders and bear the weight of their unresolved conflicts. Its continued operation speaks to the strength of their collaboration, even as their personal relationships fractured. In creating the sorting hat, the founders ensured that Hogwarts would not simply preserve their legacy, but interpret it. The hat does not replicate their judgments verbatim. It reimagines them for each new generation. This adaptability has allowed Hogwarts to remain relevant across centuries of change. Students are not moulded into copies of the past. They are guided toward communities where they can contribute meaningfully to the future. The sorting hat stands, quietly and unassumingly, as one of the most successful governance tools in magical history. Not because it enforces control, but because it balances structure with choice. Section 7. Early curriculum and the first generations. What Hogwarts taught at the start. When the first students arrived at Hogwarts, they entered a school that was still defining itself. The castle stood, the houses had been established, and the sorting hat waited patiently for each new mind. But curriculum is not something that can be fully designed in advance. It evolves through practice, necessity, and the realities of teaching living, unpredictable students. Based on surviving descriptions of early Hogwarts practices, the founders appear to have understood that early magical education had to prioritize safety above all else. Most students arrived with little formal training and uneven control over their abilities. The first lessons were therefore grounded in restraint, awareness, and basic technique. Magic was introduced not as a tool for power, but as a responsibility. core instruction likely focused on what modern Hogwarts students would recognise as foundational subjects. Simple charms taught control and intent. Basic transfiguration exercises emphasised precision and reversibility rather than spectacle. Potion making began with careful measurement and observation, instilling patience and respect for process. Defensive magic in the earliest years was not about combat, but about protection. Students learned shielding charms, counterspells for common magical mishaps, and techniques for safely disengaging from unstable magical situations. The emphasis was on prevention rather than confrontation. Herbology played a particularly important role in the early curriculum. Plants were tangible, predictable, and forgiving teachers. Through caring for magical flora, students learned consistency, attentiveness, and humility. Many early healing practices depended on plant-based remedies, making herbology essential knowledge. Astronomy, though less obviously practical, provided students with a framework for understanding time, cycles, and magical influence. The founders recognized that magic did not exist in isolation from the natural world. Celestial movements affected spell potency, potion timing, and magical creatures. Observing the sky fostered patience and perspective. History of magic, though often underestimated, served a crucial function. In a community with few written records and many oral traditions, teaching history helped establish continuity. Students learned not only what spells existed, but why certain practices were abandoned or forbidden. This historical grounding reduced the likelihood of repeating dangerous mistakes. Instruction was likely delivered through a mix of demonstration, guided practice, and discussion, inferred from later teaching traditions at Hogwarts. Large lectures were rare. Class sizes were smaller, allowing founders and early professors to tailor instruction to individual needs. This approach reflected the founders' belief that magical education was as much mentorship as instruction. Assessment in these early years was informal. Progress was measured through observation rather than standardized testing. A student's readiness to advance was judged by consistency, control, and judgment rather than speed or raw power. The founders also placed importance on interdisciplinary learning. Magic rarely fit neatly into categories. A charm might depend on astronomical timing. A potion might require herbological knowledge. Students were encouraged to see connections rather than silos. Early generations of students came from widely varied backgrounds. Some arrived from families steeped in magical tradition. Others were encountering structured magical learning for the first time. This diversity required flexibility from instructors and patience from peers. The house system played a key role in supporting this diversity. Within houses, older students mentored younger ones, passing down practical tips and emotional support. This peer learning reinforced community and reduced reliance on formal authority. Discipline was handled with an emphasis on restoration rather than punishment. Mistakes were treated as learning opportunities when possible. However, the founders were clear about boundaries. Certain forms of magic were restricted not out of fear, but out of concern for long-term harm. As the first generations progressed, patterns began to emerge. Some subjects proved universally essential. Others evolved or were set aside. The curriculum adapted to the realities of teaching magic at scale. Over time, visiting specialists were invited to teach specific disciplines. Wand makers, healers, and scholars contributed short courses or demonstrations. This exposure broadened students' understanding of what magical life could entail beyond Hogwarts. Graduates of these early cohorts became ambassadors for the school's philosophy. They carried with them not only technical skill, but an understanding of magical ethics and community responsibility. Their successes and failures informed ongoing curriculum development. Hogwarts was never static. Each year brought adjustments. Lessons were refined. New challenges emerged. The founders listened, observed, and adapted. This willingness to evolve distinguished Hogwarts from earlier, informal teaching traditions. It allowed the school to grow in complexity without losing sight of its core purpose. The early curriculum laid the groundwork for everything that followed. It established norms of care, curiosity, and restraint that would define Hogwarts for centuries. Section 8. The Founder Rift. Blood purity, trust, and the school's moral line. As Hogwarts settled into its early rhythm, the harmony that had allowed the founders to collaborate began to strain under the weight of unresolved disagreement. The school was functioning, students were learning, traditions were forming. But beneath this surface stability lay a fundamental conflict about who Hogwarts was for, and what risks were acceptable in the name of education. At the centre of this conflict was Salazar Slytherin's belief that magic should be taught only to those from magical families. His concern was not framed, at least initially, as hatred. It was rooted in fear of exposure, fear of misuse, and fear that the magical world could not survive if its knowledge spread too widely. In the centuries before Hogwarts, secrecy had been maintained through isolation and silence. Teaching magic to students with no magical heritage challenged that model. Muggle-born students, as they would later be called, arrived at Hogwarts without generational context. They'd grown up immersed in the non-magical world, often without understanding the dangers of revealing magic. To Slytherin, this represented an unacceptable vulnerability. He believed that magical families, having lived with secrecy for generations, were better equipped to handle the responsibility of magic. His position was uncompromising. In his view, caution demanded exclusion. The other founders rejected this conclusion. Helga Hufflepuff in particular argued that magical ability itself was the relevant criterion. She believed that denying education based on lineage would waste talent and deepen division. For her, inclusion was not reckless, it was ethical. Rowena Ravenclaw approached the disagreement analytically. She questioned the assumption that heritage determined behaviour. Intelligence, she argued, could be cultivated, and understanding reduced risk. Exclusion, by contrast, bred ignorance and resentment. Godric Gryffindor framed the issue in moral terms. Courage, he believed, meant trusting individuals to rise to responsibility. Fear-based exclusion was not protection, it was surrender. What made this conflict particularly painful was that all four founders were motivated by a desire to protect the magical world. They simply disagreed about how that protection should be achieved. As Hogwarts admitted students from increasingly diverse backgrounds, tensions escalated. Slytherin reportedly argued that the school was compromising its own safety. The others believed it was fulfilling its purpose. The disagreement extended beyond admissions policy. It affected curriculum, discipline, and trust among the founders themselves. Decisions that had once been collaborative became contentious. Historical accounts suggest that Slytherin began to feel outnumbered and isolated. Whether this perception was fully accurate is difficult to determine, but it shaped his actions. Eventually, the conflict reached a breaking point. Unable to persuade the others, Slytherin chose to leave Hogwarts. His departure was not quiet. It marked a fracture that would echo through the school's history. Before leaving, Slytherin took measures to ensure that his views would persist. The most significant of these was the creation of a hidden chamber within the castle, a decision that would have lasting consequences. The Founders' Rift established a moral line for Hogwarts. By rejecting exclusion based on lineage, the school affirmed a commitment to inclusion that would define its identity. At the same time, the conflict left scars. Distrust lingered. Myths grew. The idea that Hogwarts had been founded in perfect unity became a comforting simplification. The truth was more complicated. Hogwarts was born of cooperation, but also of disagreement. Its strength lay not in the absence of conflict, but in the choices made when conflict arose. The Founder Rift reminds us that institutions are shaped as much by what they reject as by what they embrace. Section 9. The Chamber of Secrets. Slytherin's lasting shadow on the castle. Salazar Slytherin's departure from Hogwarts did not mark the end of his influence. In many ways, it ensured that his presence would linger long after he was gone. The most enduring and troubling expression of that legacy was the Chamber of Secrets, a hidden space woven into the very fabric of the castle. The chamber was not an afterthought. It was designed deliberately, constructed with care, secrecy, and powerful magic. Its existence speaks to both Slytherin's brilliance and his inability to relinquish control. Unable to persuade the other founders to adopt his views, he chose instead to embed them into the castle itself. According to well-established wizarding history, preserved through multiple sources, the chamber was created to house a basilisk, a creature whose lethality made it a weapon of terror. Slytherin believed that one day his ideological descendants would cleanse the school of students he deemed unworthy. This belief was rooted in fear, but it manifested as premeditated violence. The chamber's design reflects Slytherin's mastery of concealment magic. Hidden deep beneath the castle, it was inaccessible through conventional means. Its entrance was concealed within a bathroom that did not exist at the time of the founders, demonstrating that the chamber's access adapted as the castle evolved. The use of Parseltongue as the key to the chamber was both practical and symbolic. Parseltongue was rare, hereditary, and deeply associated with Slytherin himself. By requiring it to open the chamber, he ensured that only those aligned with his lineage or ideology could access it. The basilisk itself was not merely a monster. In magical symbolism, serpents represent knowledge, power, and danger. Housing such a creature beneath a school reflected Slytherin's belief that power should be hidden, controlled, and wielded selectively. The existence of the chamber raises uncomfortable questions about trust among the founders. That Slytherin was able to construct such a space without detection suggests either remarkable secrecy or a breakdown in collaboration. It also highlights the limits of even the founders' vigilance. For centuries, the chamber existed as rumour and myth. Students whispered about it. Professors dismissed it. Its story became a cautionary tale, stripped of immediacy by time. This gradual transformation from reality to legend allowed Hogwarts to function, despite the unresolved threat beneath it. the school's daily life continued, buffered by denial and distance. When the chamber was eventually opened in later centuries, it forced Hogwarts to confront the unresolved moral conflict at its foundation. The danger was no longer theoretical, it was present, active, and lethal. The response to the chamber's opening reaffirmed the values established by the remaining founders. The school chose protection, inclusion, and accountability. The threat was confronted not through secrecy, but through collective action. The chamber's story also reshaped how Hogwarts understood its own history. It served as a reminder that institutions inherit not only ideals, but unresolved contradictions. Architecturally, the chamber demonstrates how deeply magic can be embedded into space, based on what is revealed about its construction centuries later. It exists outside the normal rhythms of the castle, preserved by enchantments designed to outlast generations. Emotionally, it represents the cost of fear-driven ideology. Slytherin's refusal to compromise transformed disagreement into danger. Yet even here, Hogwarts endured. The school did not collapse under the weight of this revelation. Instead, it absorbed the lesson, integrating it into its collective memory. The Chamber of Secrets remains a shadow on Hogwarts' history, but it is a contained one. Its exposure did not undo the school's founding principles. If anything, it clarified them. Section 10. After the founding, legacy, myth-making, and how Hogwarts became Hogwarts. When the era of the founders drew to a close, Hogwarts did not enter a period of decline or uncertainty. Instead, it began the long, gradual process of becoming an institution rather than a project. This transition is often overlooked, but it is essential to understanding why Hogwarts endured when so many other magical experiments faded into obscurity. The departure and eventual passing of the founders marked the first true test of their vision. Without their direct guidance, the systems they had designed were forced to operate on their own. Houses continued to sort students, professors continued to teach, traditions continued to form. In many ways, Hogwarts began to feel less like a bold innovation and more like a permanent feature of the magical world. This permanence did not arise from rigidity. On the contrary, Hogwarts survived because it allowed its identity to evolve. Each generation of staff interpreted the founders' principles through the lens of contemporary challenges. What remained constant was not method but purpose. Over time, the founders themselves passed into legend. Their stories were simplified, polished, and repeated. Complex disagreements were smoothed into comforting narratives of unity. This myth-making served a psychological function. Students needed heroes, not cautionary tales. The founders became symbols as much as historical figures. Yet traces of the real individuals remained embedded in the school's daily life. The house system preserved their values in lived form. Architectural features reflected their philosophies. Even the sorting hat continued to speak in a voice shaped by all four perspectives. As wizarding society developed formal governance structures, Hogwarts maintained a careful independence. It cooperated with emerging magical authorities without surrendering its educational autonomy. This balance allowed the school to adapt to new laws while remaining anchored to its founding mission. The curriculum expanded as magical knowledge grew, as evidenced by the gradual addition of subjects documented in Hogwarts records. New subjects were introduced, old practices were refined or abandoned. The founders' willingness to evolve was honoured through continued experimentation rather than strict preservation. Hogwarts also became a cultural centre. Graduates carried its influence into every corner of the magical world. Shared experiences forged at the school created informal networks of trust and collaboration that strengthened wizarding society as a whole. The school's ability to absorb crisis further solidified its place. Periods of conflict, threat, and upheaval tested Hogwarts repeatedly. Each time, the systems put in place by the founders, community, shared responsibility, and layered protection proved resilient. Importantly, Hogwarts never claimed perfection. Its history includes mistakes, blind spots, and unresolved tensions. But these imperfections did not negate its value. They reinforced the founders' central insight that education is an ongoing process, not a finished product. In the centuries that followed, Hogwarts came to represent more than a school. It became a symbol of what the magical world could be, where knowledge was shared responsibly and differences were held in balance. For students, Hogwarts offered something rare, a place to grow without hiding. For the magical community, it offered continuity. For history, it offered a living record of evolving values. The story of Hogwarts' founding is not a tale of flawless agreement or inevitable success. It is a story of risk, disagreement, and deliberate choice. The founders chose to believe that education could stabilize a fractured world. They chose cooperation over isolation, even when it was uncomfortable. That choice echoes through every corridor, classroom, and common room. It is felt each time a student is sorted, each time a lesson begins, each time knowledge is passed from one generation to the next. Hogwarts endures not because it was built perfectly, but because it was built thoughtfully. Its founders understood that the future would belong to people they would never meet. They trusted those future students and teachers to carry the school forward. As we reflect on the history of Hogwarts' founding, we are reminded that institutions are shaped by values more than by walls. Hogwarts stands as a testament to what can be achieved when education is treated as a shared responsibility. If you've enjoyed settling into the history of Hogwarts tonight, and you'd like to continue exploring wizarding lore in a calm, relaxed way, consider liking this video and subscribing to Restricted Section Lore.